Lieutenant General Asir Yasin Malik. Dear colleagues in the room and those who are virtually connected, Assalamu alaikum. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the webinar on Pakistan Kashmir Strategy, an assessment and future outlook. An assessment and future outlook. The webinar being held after 5th February, Kashmir's Solidarity Day, is a part of IPI's activities on Kashmir. IPI, I would like to recall, hosted an international webinar on Kashmir on the occasion of the first anniversary of the illegal annexation of the occupied Kashmir in August last year. The objective of this webinar is to candidly analyze Pakistan's strategy on Kashmir and suggest pathways for the future. In this regard, we would this afternoon be hearing the valuable insights of Ambassador Shamshad, General Asir Yasin, and Senator Mushahid on this very important issue that is not only a diplomatic and military challenge, but also an existential challenge for our country. As per our count, since August 5, the brave Kashmiris have endured nearly 555 days of an intensified lockdown and siege by the occupation troops. In reality, the subjugation of Kashmiris has been continuing unabated for 73 years now. All along these 7 decades, in reality, the subjugation of Kashmiris has been continuing unabated for 73 years now. You could witness instances of systematic genocide and forced exodus of Muslims from the region. Meanwhile, Hindus from outside have been brought to settle there. The goal earlier was to reduce the Muslim majority to a minority. The measures announced by Indian Prime Minister Modi on August 5, 2019 are in fact India's final attempt at wiping away the Kashmir dispute and erasing the political identity of Kashmiris through the demographic change in the valley. In essence, what began in Jammu is now being completed in the valley. Pakistan's response has been symbolic and diplomatic so far. Pakistan government exhibited a sense of emergency in the days following India's 5th August action and downgraded diplomatic ties with India. However, 18 months down the road, little could be done to create meaningful pressure on India. Although dispute has got a wider focus in the international media. Therefore, it is important that the government now reassesses its Kashmir strategy. The immediate objective of Pakistan's current Kashmir strategy is to stop ongoing genocide and force India to reverse the restrictions imposed on the people of Kashmir and its effort to change the valley's demography. In medium term, Pakistan's goal is to end Indian occupation of Kashmir, paving the way for the people of Kashmir to exercise their fundamental right of self-determination. Our distinguished panelists would share the views as to how successful have we been with this strategy and what could be done to make the impact visible, especially for the Kashmiris who are bravely fighting the Indians' oppression. With this, I would conclude my remarks and I look forward to a fruitful discussion today. Thanks once again.
Thank you, sir, for your welcome remarks and insights on the subject. Now I would like to introduce our worthy chair and speakers for today's event. Our distinguished chair for today's event is Senator Mushad Hussain Sayyed, who is Chairman Senate Foreign Affairs Committee. He is a renowned politician, veteran, journalist, and accomplished author par excellence. Senator Mushad Hussain Sayyed was to be here and chair the session from IPI, but due to some protests taking place around the parliament, he could not make up to the IPI and will chair the session online now. Then, moving to brief introductions of our other worthy speakers. Our first speaker for today's webinar is His Excellency Shamshad Ahmed, who is a seasoned Pakistani diplomat, international relations expert, and author. He served as the Foreign Secretary of Pakistan from 1997 to 2000. Earlier, he was permanent representative of Pakistan to the United Nations and ambassador of Pakistan to South Korea and Iran. Our second and final speaker for the event is Lieutenant General retired Asif Yassin Malik, who is a former Defense Secretary of Pakistan. General Malik was bestowed the privilege of gracing the American NDU's Alumni Hall of Fame in 2013, the first Pakistani to have this honor. He writes and delivers lectures on geostrategic, security, and political issues of the region. Now I would make request to our worthy speaker, His Excellency Shamshad Ahmed Sahib, to give his insights on the subject, please.
Well, first of all, let me, Mr. Chairman, through you, convey my gratitude to the IPI, Islamabad Policy Institute, and its Executive Director, Bakir Sajjad, for providing me this welcome opportunity to be part of this webinar on a subject of great importance to all of us. Well, we are deprived of the introductory remarks of our chair, but I'm sure that later on we will be benefiting the words of wisdom from Senator Mushad Hussain. We are that. Beginning with the subject, as I look at the subject this afternoon, in simplest terms, it means from here to where, or the way forward. Simplest terminology for this afternoon's subject is what is going to be the way forward. Well, for any journey to start, one has to have a destination in view. So no journey starts unless we know our manzil. Manzil jab tak na pata ho, to safar nahi shuru hota. Or in the case of Kashmir, our journey started ever since we became independent, with a roadmap clearly chartered 47 in the form of the amendment. In violation of the violation of the legality that was determined in the partition plan, under which the subcontinent was divided and Muslim majority Kashmir was to be part of Pakistan. So Kashmir dispute has now been, gentlemen, on, as we all know, on the UN agenda for more than 7 decades as one of the oldest unresolved international conflicts. Kashmir today is a somber reminder to the world that it cannot continue to ignore the legitimate aspirations of the Kashmiri people. In terms of the UN Security Council resolutions, as we all know, the people of Kashmir were to freely decide their future. After decades of their liberation struggle, I will not be going into history, but just briefly to recall, the Kashmiri people, inspired by similar movements for freedom in other parts of the world, have been waging a fierce struggle against Indian military occupation since the later part of 1989. To misrepresent the legitimacy of the Kashmiri uprising, India has been crying wolf by raising the bogey of terrorism. And India's efforts to obfuscate the Kashmir dispute as an issue of terrorism will not succeed. No matter what the Indians claim, there is but one fair, just and legal solution to Kashmir as provided in those Security Council resolutions which both India and Pakistan had mutually accepted, and they were also kind of a commitment by the entire international community. Beyond the UN resolutions, as we know, there is no compact formula or tailor-made solution available for addressing this long outstanding issue. At least till the late 1950s, I remember the Indian leaders recognized this reality, that the UN resolutions were the only framework to solve this problem. Then they started backtracking and claiming Kashmir to be an integral part of India. With changing global dynamics, the world also became complacent, if not indifferent, to honoring its own obligations. The setting aside of the UN resolutions is one thing. Discarding of the principle they embodied is quite another. आप resolutions को ignore कर सकते हैं, मगर उन असूलों को नहीं जो उन resolutions के अंदर दिए हुए हैं. The underlying cardinal principle of self-determination, जो कि charter का principle है, that cannot be thrown overboard. This is the crux of the Kashmir dispute. What should be clear to Narendra Modi is that by putting up an arrogant face, you just cannot change realities. Kashmiris want nothing but freedom from Indian occupation. Their message is loud and clear. The Kashmiri youth are dying today on the streets, not asking for jobs or for books or not even for better future. They want freedom, आज़ादी. और ये आज़ादी का लफ्ज़ अगले रोज इमरान खान ने भी लिया, जिसपे काफी हमारे यहाँ लोगों ने उस पे बतंगड़ बनाने की कोशिश की, मगर आज़ादी का मतलब एक ही होता है, फ्रीडम. फ्रीडम का मतलब एक ही होता है, आज़ादी. इसी माने में भी आप इस्तेमाल करें, वो दुरुस्त है. कश्मीरी आज़ादी चाहते हैं, फ्रीडम चाहते हैं, लेकिन ये आज़ादी और फ्रीडम वो इंडिया के शिकंजे से चाहते हैं, इंडिया के कब्जे से चाहते हैं. बात ये है कि कश्मीरी यूथ, they are holding the Pakistani flag. In a way, it is a verdict they are giving to the world from the streets of Kashmir Valley, from the streets of Srinagar, and elsewhere in the occupied territory. So this is again the crux of the Kashmir uprising. लोग कहते हैं कि आज़ाद ना कहीं कश्मीर हो जाए, जब वो पाकिस्तान का झंडा उनके हाथ में होता है और वो अपनी जान का नजराना पेश कर रहे होते हैं, तो वो अपना फैसला सुना रहे होते हैं. ये पाकिस्तान के अवाम को समझना चाहिए, जो इमरान खान की बातों को बतंगड़ बना के डिस्टॉर्ट करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं हमारे यहाँ कुछ लोग. So, coming to the situation in Jammu and Kashmir, brutal military force brings no relief to anyone. India will do itself good by seeing the writing on the wall. Stark lessons are there to learn from history. Popular movements cannot be suppressed. Even the world's sole superpower today owes its existence to a long war of independence. And India cannot deny its own history. It was the War of Independence in 1857 that laid the road to India's liberation as an independent state. The Kashmir settlement has to be in accordance with the wishes of the Kashmiri people, ascertained in accordance of the principles laid down in the UN resolutions, in conditions of freedom from intimidation and coercion. It is indeed a colossal challenge, we know that. Over the years, Kashmir dispute has also turned into a global peace, issue of peace and security. It has magnified manifold, becoming today a veritable nuclear flashpoint. On the frozen landscape of the Siachen, as along the ever volatile line of control in Kashmir, both countries remain locked in an eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation. Irrespective of Narendra Modi's claims, Pakistan, under its new leadership, has managed in the last couple of years to place Kashmir high on the global radar screen as a nuclear flashpoint. Unlike his predecessors, who were always apologetic in even uttering the word Kashmir, Imran Khan has placed Kashmir on top of the global agenda. I'm sorry, Shahid Saab, I'm not being political, but I'm just narrating reality. Because I have been associated with previous governments for nearly 40 years, and I know each and everything what has been happening in respect of. In his debut appearance at the United Nations General Assembly session, Imran Khan articulated Pakistan's principled position on the Kashmir dispute. His sole purpose at the UN was to wake up the world and sensitize it of the ongoing Indian repression in the occupied state. What we 100 diplomats, Pakistan's diplomats and 100 missions abroad could not do, Imran Khan did in just 2 speeches in the General Assembly. So even earlier in his address at the Azad Jammu and Kashmir Assembly, Imran Khan had promised the Kashmiris that from now onward, he will be their ambassador at every global forum. And he assured them that Pakistan will always stand by the Kashmiris. We will never abandon them and will continue to support their legitimate freedom and struggle. Their cause is our cause. This is our policy now. Imran Khan has indeed fulfilled his mission with courage and conviction. This brings me to a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King as a way forward. He said, the best way to solve any problem is to remove its call to the Kashmir people as well as to both to the question from here to where. Yes, Kashmir is under siege today. The illegal and unilateral steps taken by India in occupied Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, on 5th August 2019, in contravention of the international law and relevant UN Security Council resolutions, have once again brought the entire region to the brink of another conflict. Goethe his quote I like to share with you. In fact, this quote I have given on the front page of my last book also. He said, man was not born to solve the problem of the universe, but rather to seek to lay bare the heart of the problem and then confine himself within the limits of what is amenable to understanding. This is most important, the last words of his quote. I guess we are here for a realistic understanding of the Kashmir problem, to be able to have some idea on a pragmatic way forward that answers the question as to really where should we go from here now. And that requires obviously a sound approach. And it's not the first time that I'm talking of this sound approach, because I remember that it was this same sound approach that guided the first talks on Kashmir in early 50s when Sir Owen Dixon tried to conduct the India-Pakistan talks on the basis of his approach of limited implementation of the UN resolutions. And then it is also the same sound approach that guided the deliberations of Bhutto Swaran Singh talks in 1962, which had the blessings of Pandit Nehru and President Ayub Khan. So I would suggest here, there does exist a dispute. When we talk of the sound approach, we must admit there does exist a dispute between India and Pakistan on the future status of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And all UN maps carry this notice. The Simla Agreement itself recognizes this reality. There is also a third party to this dispute, namely the people of the state, or the Kashmiris, which in fact are the main party. This dispute urgently warrants a solution, as time has failed to solve it. Status quo is the problem and cannot be a solution. This I used to tell Mr. General Musharraf also when he was trying to legitimize the status quo. I used to say that status quo is a problem, you cannot make it a solution. So nor can there be a solution by force. We all admit that. I think nobody can deny this. A peaceful settlement involving all the three parties alone can ensure peace. All the rest is rhetoric. Let rhetoric remain for the media. With apologies to again Mushahid Saab, the serious minds must focus on reality. We cannot afford to blindly remain committed to principles while the enemy is already decimating them like dirt. There is absolutely no doubt that Pakistan is in a tough spot. India wants Pakistan to accept the Indian decision of August 5, 2019 as fait accompli, pushing Pakistan to a stage where it can also decide the future of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Gilgit and Baltistan, like India itself has done with its own illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. What was that? Annex, assimilate, and move on. Well, we have seen the reaction of the international community to the Indian annexation and occupation of Jammu and Kashmir. Does anyone even care that India is trying to undermine the UN Security Council resolutions through the new domicile law? Does it matter to anyone that under the law of armed conflict into an occupied territory under 4th Geneva Convention, no one cares, and it does not matter. If it mattered, India would have been named and shamed at every international human rights forum without Pakistan pushing for it. What should we do then? Should we juxtapose what India did on August 5, 2019 and take the Indian bait? Should we assimilate Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan and give it provincial status so that the Indian claim on these two territories is forever laid to rest? Should Pakistan wage a war to liberate Kashmir, irrespective of the costs involved? Can we afford it? Should Pakistan work with China to create difficult circumstances for India by engaging it in a two-front war in Ladakh, enough to leverage the situation whereby India is bound to reverse its August 5 decisions and restore the status quo ante in JK? So with these questions, gentlemen, I leave here. And the rest, of course, I have placed on the table some ideas, some thoughts, which I'm sure are enough for this afternoon's discussion. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's look forward to further discussion.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Shamshad Ahmed, for enlightening us with profound insights on the Kashmir issue. It was indeed a highly in-depth analysis on the subject. Thank you very much for your time. I would again like to make a request to the chair of our today's event, Senator Mushal Hussain Sayyed, to continue the session with his remarks on the subject.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman rahim. And a very warm greetings from Islamabad, which is currently, actually, we are in the Parliament House. I was having meetings, and it's a bright and sunny day. And special greetings to my old friend Shamshad Saab, and also to my old friend General Yasin Malik Saab. And of course, Bukhari Saab, you are the guru of the meeting, so a warm welcome. And I'll be looking forward to a proactive participation. Just to mention that this is a very important time to have the seminar. And last week, as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, I called a special meeting of the committee and the foreign minister was there himself. And we focused on the Kashmir issue. And we also focused on the Kashmiri political prisoners. And I invited the families of some of the prisoners who are in Islamabad, the wife of Yasin Malik Saab, Mashal Malik Saiba, and her daughter, Razia Sultana Saiba. And then I also called the nephew of Asiya Andrabi Saiba, Dr. Mujahid Gilani Saab. He was also here, who is the grandnephew of Ali Gilani Saab, as you know. And so we had a very good discussion, about 3 hours briefing in Canberra by the foreign minister on Kashmir. And I told the foreign minister, as far as the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee is concerned, and just to set the record straight, because Rana Saab had mentioned about rhetoric, that as far as the Foreign Affairs Committee is concerned, we in the Foreign Affairs Committee take national security and foreign policy issues above partisan politics. And I told it very clearly, and I've already said so, that Kashmir, nuclear, CPEC, and Israel issues, Palestine, are above party politics, and they should not be part of any rhetoric or any political confrontation. Just a small reference was made to the past also. I think that let's not forget that the most important national security decision in the history of Pakistan was 28th of May 1998, and that was undertaken by Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif when I was Information Minister and Rana Saab was Foreign Secretary. And it was a difficult decision under pressure, and it was a decision led by the government of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, and I was fortunate enough to be the first to advise him to go for the nuclear explosion. And I think that put Kashmir also on the international arena for that moment, because the last time the UN has referred to the Kashmir issue in many of its resolutions was on 6th of June, 1998, and the resolution number 1172, when it referred to Kashmir as the dispute which requires resolution. So, and after the martyrdom of Burhan Muzaffar Mani in July 2016, it was the same government which sent out special envoys to 25 ongoing, because the Kashmir issue is above NC, and that was by General Musharraf, the fundamental policy, and that was resisted, I would say, by the Foreign Office of that period. And I'd like to especially mention the name of Inamul Haq, and I'll also like to mention the name of Reyaz Khokhar, who took very strong positions on that. So having said so, I think that we are currently seeing new realities also. Rana Saab has placed certain options on the table. I think that some of the new realities need to be taken into cognizance when the discussion starts in earnest. One new reality, of course, is that China has become a de facto party to the Kashmir dispute thanks to the Indian government's short-sighted policy. And you can see the change in the Chinese position, that they have now started referring to Kashmir in the context of UN Security Council resolutions. And this has now become their position after that, because they felt that the Modi regime was trying to also not just talk of annexation of occupied Kashmir, but also they had said that Ladakh and parts of China, and Muzaffarabad and Gilgit-Baltistan were parts of India. I think that is the new reality. And the second new reality is important, that the US-Indian strategic arrangement or linkage has become very strong, very solid. And just a week before the American elections, we saw on 26th October, Defense Secretary Esper and also the Secretary of State Pompeo in Delhi to sign the BECA agreement, Basic Exchange Cooperation Mechanism. And there also shows that the US is keen to rope in India in its campaign against China. And the third new reality, I think, which is very important for us when we talk of the future, is that most of his decisions seem to have now backfired in the context of the Kashmir annexation and also COVID-19. You can see what happened in India on 26th January, Black Day. We are seeing resistance in Kashmir also, although it's a peaceful resistance, but they have not accepted the annexation. And we have also seen the Sikh farmers protest, and relations between four of neighbors of India have not been very good in the recent past: Pakistan, China, Nepal, and Bangladesh even. So I think that is a new emerging situation. More, we'll discuss it later on in the QA and the final remarks also, but it's a pleasure to be in this group, and I look forward to the next speaker, who's always been very respected and thinking general, just as Rana Saab is also a very thinking diplomat also, and we look forward to his comments on the way forward and how to take the Kashmir issue in the current changing context. Thank you so much, Bukhari Saab, and pleasure to interact with you. Thank you.
Now I would like to make our next speaker, Lieutenant General Yasin Malik, share his insights.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I'd like to thank IPI for giving me this opportunity and inviting me to this very important activity. But in the same context, I would say that in the presence of Shamshad Saab and Senator Mujahid Hussain, I'm a small fry, and it's very difficult to speak in the shadow of such, learned people and experienced people. But still, I will try to make some contribution to the discussion. Now, first of all, we all are very aware of the present situation prevailing in Kashmir in the backdrop of August 5 decisions, which are well known to the people. So I would not like to dwell a lot on that. But I have come to the conclusion that this decision was taken by Mr. Modi after getting a nudge from the sole superpower in the world, and as a consequence of the quadrilateral alliance and the strategic partnership with the United States and the redescription of Indo-Pacific strategic environment. Now, this has given a lot of encouragement to the Indians that they are now the local bullies, so to say, on behalf of the United States and the West in general, and in a very sort of I would say most misunderstood, I would call it a stupid assumption that China can be outweighed by the Indians. India is no match to China, at least for the next 100 years. So I think they have made a mistake. Now, as far as Indian conduct is concerned, the Prime Minister openly described it as a Nazism in the modern world. But I would say it is worse than Nazism. The Nazis were killing people. The Indians are, roasting them alive. They are alive and yet they are dead. So this is worse than Nazism, what is happening in Kashmir. And I think rightly Mushahid Saab brought out also that Kashmir issue is no more a trilateral issue between India, Pakistan and the Kashmiris. It has now become a quadrilateral issue with Chinese, coming active on this issue. And the activity of the Chinese is basically as a consequence of Indian, adventurism on the Indo-Chinese borders. And the Chinese have given a good sort of reply to the Indians. And very few people noted that right on the day that Mr. Biden was taking oath in his inauguration, the Chinese gave a thrashing to the Indians. So I think the Chinese are sending a message to everybody about the Indians' conduct in overall on the China-India border, but also on the Kashmir issue. So therefore, that is very interesting situation, which was not there before 5th of August and onward. Now, in the West, it is generally considered as a real estate issue. That Kashmir is important for Pakistan, and some of our policymakers have also been talking of, all the rivers coming from there. I think those are secondary issues as far as Pakistan is concerned, and the principal stance of our government back in '48 and those days when we went to the United Nations. In fact, the Indians went to the United Nations. So that was the issue of the right of self-determination of the people of Kashmir. So that is also a very important factor, which the Prime Minister is now, in a way, clarified, and he's standing with the people of Kashmir, where millions are living in virtual imprisonment. And I would call they are living in a death row. Nobody knows that the next morning they will be alive or not, men, women, and children. So that is the situation in Kashmir. And the principle is that the people, millions of people are being denied their right to live their life as they want to live, according to their freedom. Now, it is very interesting that the world in general and United States in particular, they always talk of their way of life. Nobody talks of the way of life of Kashmiris. They have equal right as any country in the world to live their lives as they want. It is not a religious factor. It is a humanitarian factor. All Kashmiris, be they Hindus, Buddhists, or Muslims, they have a right to live as they want to live, as they want to spend their life, as they want to have, happiness and their ambitions in life. So if you are denying that, I think they are just like animals. You only deny such things to animals who are caged. Even the animals in an open forest have their own ambitions and have their own ways of life. So I think they are worse than animals. Talking of United Nations, the lesser said, the better. It is, I think, worst debating club that we have ever seen. And now, it is a very unfair place where the 5 superpowers dictate its way forward. And if it is in their interest, the things work. If not, then they go in a freezer. Having said that, it does not mean that Pakistan does not knock at the doors of United Nations. We must keep United Nations hot on the subject, and the Prime Minister has done it pretty well in his address to the United Nations General Assembly. So therefore, I think we, in spite of United Nations not delivering during the last 74 years, its inability or its cold feet to implement its own resolution, in spite of that, Pakistan has to be on the front foot and keep sort of the issue of Kashmir alive. Because we must remember that all the diplomats who sit there, the permanent representatives, Shamshad Saab would bear me out, they send a report back on each speech that is made in the United Nations. So at least the foreign offices of all the member countries do get a report on this issue. Now, Pakistan's stance has been very clear, and I think there is, again, I would like to say there is nothing wrong in saying independence for the Kashmiri people. That is to say, independence of thought, independence to live their lives as they want to. That is their freedom. Now, it does not necessarily mean joining India or Pakistan or being independent. Now, in this context, why this controversy arose when the Prime Minister made a speech the other day, I think the domestic audience has been given sort of the wrong slogan. I principally disagree with the slogan of Kashmir Banega Pakistan. My view is it should be Kashmir Kashmiriyon ka hai. This is the stance that should be given and left to the Kashmiris. And as I think clearly brought out by Shamshad Sahab and Shahid Sahab also, there is no doubt that the Kashmiri people want to be part of Pakistan. But then it is their decision and we should respect it as it is. It strengthens our stance. It sort of resonates with our international stance. I see a difference between the domestic stance and the international stance. That domestic stance, the man on the street has lesser understanding of larger strategic issues. He is just sort of stuck in the rhetoric. Now, rhetoric, if it says Kashmir banega Pakistan, it means Pakistan is interested in Kashmir joining Pakistan. No, sir. We are interested in giving the right to the Kashmiris to decide whether to join Pakistan or not join or whatever they feel good for their future. So I think that has to be revisited, if I may say so. The other issue that I have over many years is that there has been a diplomatic effort, more or less with different governments, and again with apologies to Shahid Sahab, he may have been very active in it, but the policies have been pretty low in some of the governments of the previous times. Now, my suggestion to it is that all the governments, all the political leaders in those countries, they are looking at pressure from outside. Now, where we are faltering is the awareness in the people of those countries. Now, if we assume, and which is not misplaced to assume, that most of the countries are democratic countries, so their policies are driven by the public opinion of those countries. And I'm afraid we have not done much to mobilize the public opinion in those countries so that they force their leaders to talk about the Kashmiris' plight and to talk about the right of self-determination of the people of Kashmir. So in my opinion, we need a very strong campaign to connect with the people of those countries and, expose the Indian atrocities and the situation in Kashmir. Now, once that is done, then we should expect the people of those countries to rise and sort of force their politicians, their governments, their parties, political parties, to stand up for the people of Kashmir against the atrocities committed by the Indians. So, in my opinion, this is a very important step which the government should take, which the think tanks should take, which the NGOs should take, is create an awareness in the people of those countries. Governments, yes, the ambassadors and everybody is doing a good job, but I think there is a requirement to have a people-to-people awareness campaign, and one of it could be a parliamentary campaign. Unfortunately, Kashmir committees have not delivered, and we have left Kashmir committee chairmanship as a prize for somebody. So therefore, I think we should go beyond the Kashmir committee. Our parliamentarians should visit So should be a democracy to democracy dialogue about the Kashmiris, at least in the important countries of the world. So these are the two major recommendations that I made, one domestic and one international. And I hope that we will continue to pursue and we will see in our lifetimes change in Kashmir, where the people of Kashmir can decide their own future and live their life as they want to. Once again, thank you very much, sir, for giving me this opportunity. And I wish everybody best of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your comprehensive and in-depth comments on the subject. It was certainly an informative and thought-provoking session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Saab, for a very informative presentation, very instructive also. You also gave some insights for the future. And I think that when we talk of, I think the two key points that you made, both about the situation within Pakistan, how we should handle it, and secondly, also about public opinion. Let me just give a brief insight on public opinion. I remember in 2003, when America was planning to attack Iraq illegally, and it was an immoral and unjust and illegal war also. The New York Times had written an editorial in the context of the largest ever demonstration for peace in the Western history in modern times. There were big demos in London, Washington, Rome, Berlin, Madrid, everywhere. They said there are two superpowers in the world. One is the United States of America, the other is world public opinion. So public opinion does matter, and I think that is a very key component. And frankly, I would say that all across, throughout, there has been this lacuna of failing in our strategy. The second one you mentioned also about the Kashmir Committee, and I think the Kashmir Committee also has to be above party politics, and it should be in the hands of those who can take it forward. And I would like to mention that I've also been, we are also included in the Apex Kashmir Committee, which was formed after 5th August. Myself and Naveed Qamar Saab and Sirajul Haq Saab from the opposition. This includes Foreign Minister, this includes DG ISI, DGMO, DG ISPR, as well as the Law Minister, as well as Attorney General and the Chairman Kashmir Committee. And there have been discussions. And before COVID, the plan was made for, and I would say great minds think alike, for parliamentary diplomacy. And it was agreed that parliaments have to exchange other parliaments, especially in Europe. Because Europe, the public opinion on human rights is strong. And I would say even now, I see a change in the United States of America. The US Congress, particularly even the senators and some of the congressmen and congresswomen, for the first time, there has been talk of Kashmir issue, human rights. Biden himself spoke on Kashmir in July 2020 when he was a presidential candidate. And Kamala Harris, as senator, she spoke on the floor of the House and says Kashmiris are not alone. So I think the resonance of the Kashmir issue, largely because of Modi's own policies, which was reflected in the Economist cover story, Intolerant India. And today within India also, I think, and we've also decided to have an outreach to Indian public opinion within India, which is not with Modi. And there are a lot of those people because India is a very diverse society. So there, that aspect is also being looked after. Thank you, Jan Saab. Ji, I think we'll have some question answers and comments.
Yes, actually we have already received a few questions. I have written them out. I would like to read them out to our speakers to get more insights on the subject. Question number one is from Ali Ahmed from Kajadum University. Mr. Ali Ahmed is asking about the Article 257 of the Constitution of Pakistan. He asks, Prime Minister Imran Khan has recently announced about offering independence to Kashmir after plebiscite. I would request our panelists to express their views about the issue.
Shamshad Saab. Please unmute yourself.
Wait a minute.
Haji, now we can hear you.
Okay. Now
Yes.
can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I was wondering whether it is 257 or 258 article.
Article
I think
257.
257.
257.
257.
257.
Yeah.
Actually, this article involves a decision once the Kashmiris have already exercised their right to self-determination. They have made up their mind to join, to accede to Pakistan. And then they will be asked about their future. Now, many questions can arise on this. What does it mean? इमरान खान का क्या मतलब था? इमरान खान का प्लेन मतलब था जो हम लोगों का भी मतलब हमेशा होता है बाहर जब कोई हमसे पूछता है कि what do you mean by the right of self-determination? So we say that the Kashmiris have to decide their future. They say that if it is the decision is restricted to joining either India or Pakistan, then it is not a right of self-determination. It is a real estate. Then both countries should decide between themselves. They are right. So that is why tactically we have always made it a point that whenever we are talking of the right of self-determination of the Kashmiri people, then it is basically in the context of their freedom, their liberation, azadi puri tarah se. Or they can decide even to later on to be part of either of the two entities, or even to remain as a third entity, as it is known as third option. So we cannot at the moment say that no, they cannot decide the third option, because otherwise the world will not pay any attention to the implementation of these resolutions. It becomes a bilateral property dispute. So we have to look at this issue in that context. तो जहां तक इस आर्टिकल की बात है, this is a fair article कि once they are part of Pakistan, then they will be free to choose whether they want to be a special status within the Federation of Pakistan, whether they want a special territory, or whether they want to be a province like other provinces. So they will decide there. But here another question arises. Now I move beyond that question, and I pose this question to my colleagues here in the panel. That we in Pakistan have experienced over the last 70 years that the federation that we now have, the units have been divided on the basis of language and ethnicity. So as a result, what we find is that we now have 4 राजधानियां हैं बुनियादी तौर पर, सियासी राजधानियां जो कि लिंग्विस्टिक और एथनिक बुनियादों पर बनी हैं, और उनकी ओनरशिप कुछ फैमिलीज हैं जो उन्होंने अपने जिम्मे ली हुई है, काबू किया हुआ है, कब्जा किया हुआ है. तो is this a good example to the Kashmiris? The question is, aren't Kashmiris intelligent enough to see the writing on the wall? In Pakistan, what they see, 4 language, ethnic or linguistic बुनियादों पर राजधानियां. That's why some of the Kashmiris are correct. The other day, I had an opportunity to participate in a webinar with Kashmiris, Kashmiri intellectuals, civil society people. And I had a long discussion with them on this very aspect. And they were absolutely clear in their mind that we understand that there is no risk or threat to our Kashmiriyat, because Kashmiriyat is a permanent, जिसको कहते हैं ना अबदी आइडेंटिटी होती है, उसको खत्म नहीं किया जाता. मैं पंजाबी पैदा हुआ था, पंजाबी मरूंगा. कश्मीरी जो है वो कश्मीरी पैदा होता है, कश्मीरी मरता है, वो चाहे दुनिया के किसी कोने में रह जाए. सिंधी जो है वो चाहे मगरबी अफ्रीका की किसी अफ्रीकन कंट्री में 30-40 साल से या 100 साल से रह रहा है, कश्मीर वो सिंधी है. सो मकसद है किसी की जो एथनिक आइडेंटिटी है उसको कभी कोई खतरा नहीं होता. ये सिर्फ खतरा है तो ये सियासतदान हैं जो सेल्फ सर्विंग, जो करप्ट हमारे हुक्मरान हैं, उन्होंने इस एथनिक और लैंग्वेज को बुनियाद बनाकर एक्सप्लॉइट कर रहे हैं इन चीजों को. तो कश्मीर के मुस्तकबिल सोचने से पहले हमें भी सोचना होगा कि हमने क्या वो इस इस किस्म की सूबाइयत का हिस्सा बनेंगे और क्या किस तरीके से होगा, तो बेहतर होगा हम अपने फेडरल स्ट्रक्चर पे भी नजर डालें। और दूसरा पॉइंट मेरा ये है कि कश्मीर में इस वक्त जो कश्मीरियों को डिवाइड किया जा रहा है वो पाकिस्तानी पॉलिटिक्स डिवाइड कर रही है सबसे ज्यादा। कोई पीपल्स पार्टी है, कोई नून लीग है, कोई पीटीआई है। लेट देयर बी ओनली कश्मीरी पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज इन आजाद कश्मीर एंड गिलगित बल्तिस्तान। लोकल मुकामी पार्टियां होनी चाहिए। ये गंदी पॉलिटिक्स ले जाके, डिवाइसिव पॉलिटिक्स ले जाके वहां पे गाली गलोच आपस में लड़ा रहे हैं कश्मीरियों को, तो कहां सॉलिडारिटी रह जाएगी? कश्मीरियों को क्या मिसाल दे रहे हैं कि वो आइंदा पाकिस्तान की तरफ किसी खुश ख्याली के साथ उस मुस्तकबिल की तरफ देखें? ये क्वेश्चन मैं अपने कोलीग्स पर डालता हूं।
Yes, I would agree with Shamshad Saab. I think this is one of the very disturbing and negative elements, and this is one of the weaknesses in a case. Then, when issues about Kashmir, which is above partisan politics, it's a national strategic issue for us. It is politicized because of domestic political point scoring, and unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, we may see more of it this year because there are going to be elections in the summer of 2021, inshallah, in Azad Kashmir. And then there's going to be political wrangling. And that will be very, very unfortunate because these elections come at a very crucial phase. I've been telling my friends and colleagues in parliament from all parties that on Kashmir issue, at least, we should try to speak with one voice. And we also tried to have on 5th of February, some sort of a semblance of a national united framework, but we could not do that in the overall parliament. But we managed to do that, by the way, and that's good news, in the Senate of Pakistan, where we had a united front among all political parties. There are 3 resolutions on Kashmir. I myself drafted it. One was on the general issue of Kashmir, and the 2 were on political business, and they were accepted by both sides of the aisle. And I think that has to be the way forward. And second, the other point also, I totally agree with him, that we cannot have provinces which are based mostly on linguistic or ethnic considerations, because we talk the Federation of Pakistan, it's a larger thing. The issues have to be focused on the issue by the yardstick of administrative good governance, not by ethnicity or linguistic affinity. Thank you.
Let me add a little bit. First of all, I totally agree with Senator Shahid and Shamshad Saab about the domestic Pakistani politics seeping into Kashmir. On that count, I would suggest to Shahid Saab, he sits at a very powerful place, that if all the political parties decide that in the election campaign of Azad Kashmir elections, the local problems, the problems of the people of Azad Kashmir should be discussed rather than the golabari on each other on what is happening in Islamabad and Karachi and Lahore and whatnot. So I think that is not a जुए शीर लाना तो नहीं ये बनता। बहुत आसान है कि आप वहाँ के लोगों को वहाँ के मसाइल के ऊपर मोटिवेट करें कि भाई ये पीपल पार्टी उनके मसले हल कर सकती है, या मुस्लिम लीग कर सकती है, या पीटीआई कर सकती है। अब उस जगह तो हम नहीं है, जैसे शमशाद साहब कह रहे थे कि यहाँ वहाँ ये पार्टियां ही ना हो। ये तो अनफॉर्चुनेटली इवन एक्सपैट्रिएट्स को हमने डिवाइड कर दिया है इन पार्टियों की वजह से। और शॉकिंग बात ये है कि दुनिया में और कोई बड़ी ऐसे मुल्क नहीं है जिसकी पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज ने एक्सपैट्रिएट्स को डिवाइड किया हो। ये डिवाइड एंड बेनिफिट का जो नया फार्मूला है, इसका तो कोई हल नहीं है हमारे पास। लेकिन कश्मीर में जरूर ये पार्टियां मिलके कश्मीरी अवाम के इंटरेस्ट के अंदर फैसला कर सकती हैं कि आज़ाद कश्मीर के इलेक्शन के अंदर हम एक दूसरे को नीचा नहीं दिखाने की कोशिश करेंगे। जो कुछ पाकिस्तान में हो रहा है वो सिर्फ कश्मीरी पॉलिटिक्स के अंदर होना चाहिए। दूसरा, आई टोटली एग्री कि हमने ये 4 सूबे 5 सूबे बना के बैठ गए हैं, और मेरा तो बड़ा इस पे क्रिटिकल व्यू है कि हमने आईन में तरामीम करके ऑलमोस्ट डिफैक्टो कॉन्फेडरेशन बना दिया है हमने, और बड़ा एक डिफिकल्ट سٹیج آ گئی ہے جہاں پر فیڈریشن کے جو معاملات ہیں ان کو فیڈرل گورنمنٹ چلا سکے. خیر یہ ایک الگ بحث ہے کہ اس آئین کے کو ہم نے ریویو کرنا چاہیے. یہ صحیفہ قرآن نہیں ہے, یہ ایک انسانوں کا بنایا ہوا ڈاکیومنٹ ہے جو کبھی بھی ایک ڈائنامک ڈاکیومنٹ نہیں ہو سکتا. ڈائنامک تو صرف اللہ کا کلام ہے جو آخری وقت تک رہے گا بغیر کسی اس کے. سو آئی ٹوٹلی اگری ود بوتھ دا سجیشن, اور اس کے لیے وے فارورڈ میرے پاس تو یہی ہے کہ تمام پارٹیاں اکٹھی مل کے بیٹھیں اور یہ فیصلہ کریں کہ یہ یہاں کی گولہ باری کو یہاں ہی چھوڑ کے جائیں. تھینک یو.
ٹھیک.
Thank you very much. We have another question from Miss Nosheen Bashir from Punjab Education Department. She asks, why do we as a country and state interpret the Kashmir issue from our perspective and not from the perspective of a common Kashmiri resident? Once we think about Kashmir, the first thing that comes to our mind is the Indian oppression against the Kashmiris. Don't you think that any attempt on part of Islamabad to constitutionally integrate AJK or Gilgit Baltistan would tantamount to destroying the entire idea of the Kashmiris' right to self-determination?
بہرحال سمجھ نہیں آیا پورا سوال جی, اس کو ذرا سمجھا دیجیے کیا کہتے ہیں. مشاہد صاحب آپ نے سمجھ لیا کچھ سوال؟
ذرا تھوڑا سا کلیریفائی کی ضرورت کر دیں. ٹھیک کہہ رہے ہیں رانا صاحب, پھر سے ذرا آرام سے ریپیٹ کر دیں ذرا.
نوشین بشیر صاحبہ پوچھ رہی ہیں کہ why do we as a country and state interpret the Kashmir issue from our perspective and not from the perspective of a common Kashmiri citizen?
ٹھیک ہے چلیے ٹھیک ہے, لیٹ می ٹرائی ٹو آنسر دس کوسچن. دیکھیے ہم کچھ نہیں انٹرپریٹ کر رہے, ہمارا ایک موقف ہے, میں جواب دے رہا ہوں اس سوال کا. ہمارا ایک موقف ہے جو گزشتہ 70 سال سے قائم ہے. حکومتیں ہمارے ہاں بدلتی رہی ہیں, پرائم منسٹر آتے رہے ہیں جاتے رہے ہیں, صدر بنتے رہے ہیں صدر جاتے رہے ہیں, لیکن اور خارجہ پالیسی ملک کی ایک رہی ہے اور اس کا ایک کانسٹنٹ رہا ہے. خارجہ پالیسی میں تبدیلیاں ہوتی رہی ہیں, but the only one constant that never changed was our policy on Kashmir. ہمارا جو موقف ہے کشمیر پر, وہ کیا موقف ہے؟ ہمارا موقف جو ہے وہ جس طرح میں نے اپنے انٹروڈکٹری ریمارکس میں کہا تھا کہ ایک لیگیلٹی کی بیسس پرووائڈ کی گئی تھی پارٹیشن کے وقت. یہ جو جس نے بھی سوال کیا ہے وہ ذرا غور سے سمجھنے کی کوشش کرے مجھ سے, کہ اس وقت ایک فریم ورک دیا گیا تھا جس کی بنا پر بر صغیر کی تقسیم کی گئی تھی 2 حصوں میں, ایک ہندو میجورٹی کا تھا اور دوسرا مسلم میجورٹی کا ہوتا. یہ تھا قانونی فریم ورک, اور ساتھ ریاستوں کے لیے یہ کہا تھا کہ جو مسلم میجورٹی کی ریاستیں ہیں وہ مسلم میجورٹی کی طرف چلی جائیں گی اور جو ہندو میجورٹی کی ہیں ادھر چلی جائیں گی. تو اب آپ بھی یہ ان خاتون کو بھی پتا ہوگا کہ حیدرآباد اور جونا گڑھ وہ ہندو میجورٹی کی ریاستیں تھیں مگر راجے مسلمان تھے ان کے, تو ہندوستان نے ان پر قبضہ کر لیا یہ کہہ کے کہ چونکہ میجورٹی ہندو ہے تو وہ ہمارا حصہ ہے. لیکن یہاں کشمیر پہ چونکہ راجہ جو تھا ہندو تھا, اس کا بہانہ ایک ڈبل سٹینڈرڈ وہاں چلایا اور اس پہ قبضہ کر لیا. تو یہ ایک ہمارا موقف اس انلیگیلٹی سے ہوتا ہے, اور اس کا پارٹیشن پلان تھا. پھر یہ ہمارا موقف مزید ری انفورس ہوا یونائٹڈ نیشنز میں. It was not Pakistan which went to the United Nations, it was India which went to the United Nations. چلیے ہم چلے گئے وہاں, جواب ہم نے دیا, اور جو فیصلہ وہاں صادر ہوا وہ پھر وہی تھا, وہی مسلم میجورٹی اور ہندو میجورٹی کی بنیاد پر تھا. لیکن انہوں نے کہا کہ اب کشمیریوں کو آپ فیصلہ کرنے کا حق دے دیں. وہ پہلے بھی اس طرف بھی یہ فیصلہ تھا اس قسم کا, تو وہ پھر اب ہم اس فیصلے کا انتظار کر رہے ہیں. تو میں یہ کہہ رہا ہوں کہ اب کشمیری تو ہیں آزادی کی ایک جدوجہد کر رہے ہیں, تو وہ اپنی آواز باقاعدہ لاؤڈ اینڈ کلیئر اٹھا کے اپنا فیصلہ صادر کر رہے ہیں پاکستان کے حق میں. جب وہ اپنی جان کا نذرانہ دیتے ہیں ان کے ہاتھ میں پاکستانی پرچم ہوتا ہے. میں یہ بار بار کہا کرتا ہوں کہ کشمیری ایک طرح سے پاکستان کے حق میں فیصلہ صادر آلریڈی کر رہے ہیں, کر چکے ہیں. تو اب یہ جو ہے ہم نے اپنا موقف بار بار رکھنا ہے. یہ کشمیریوں کا موقف تو وہی ہے جو ہمارا ہے. جس طرح بعض کشمیریوں نے اعتراض کیا کہ جی یہ ناردرن ایریاز کو کیوں صوبہ بنایا جا رہا ہے. تو میں ہمیشہ ان کو یہ کہا کرتا ہوں کہ پاکستان ان کی بھی منزل ہے, ناردرن ایریاز والے, گلگت بلتستان والے, اور کشمیری عوام کے لیے بھی پاکستان منزل ہے. تو اگر کوئی پہلے صوبہ بنتا ہے, بعد میں صوبہ بنتا ہے, باوجود جو نیشنل سیکیورٹی کے تقاضے ہوتے ہیں اس کی وجہ سے اگر کوئی جلدی دیر تاخیر ہو جاتی ہے وہ اور چیز ہے. لیکن کشمیر جو ہے یہ بنیادی طور پر پاکستان کا حصہ ہے, یہ ماننا پڑے گا. یعنی کوئی اگر آزادی کے بعد کشمیری فیصلہ بھی کرنا چاہیں, اگرچہ ان کو حق ملتا ہے, لیکن یہ فیصلہ سوچ لیں 5000 سال ہو پرانی تاریخ ہے کشمیریوں کی, یہ کشمیریوں کو سوچنا ہے. میں اگلے دن ہی کشمیری ویبینار میں کہہ رہا تھا 5000 سال آپ کی تاریخ ہے, ان 5000 سالوں میں مجھے بتا دیجئے کب آپ ایک آزاد ملک کے طور پر آپ کا وجود تھا. وہ ہمیشہ یا کسی ایک راجے کے انڈر ہوتے تھے یا کسی دوسرے کا, یا کبھی سینٹرل ایشیا سے کوئی لوگ آ جاتے تھے, کبھی ہندو تھے, کبھی سکھ تھے, تو کبھی انگریز تھے. تو کشمیریوں کی جو لوکیشن ہے وہ ان کے لیے ایک ایسا عذاب ہے کہ وہ نہیں آزاد رہ سکتے, اور وہ یا پاکستان کا حصہ بن کے رہیں گے یا انڈیا کا. یہ فیصلہ انہوں نے کرنا ہے جو اقوام متحدہ نے کہا تھا. اگر وہ انڈیا کا حصہ رہیں گے تو ہندو میجورٹی کے غلام بن کے رہیں گے, پاکستان کا حصہ رہیں گے تو مسلمانوں میں اسی عذاب کے ساتھ رہیں گے جس عذاب کے ساتھ پاکستان ایک مسلم ریاست کے طور پر رہا ہے. میں عذاب کی بات کر رہا ہوں, آزادی کی بات نہیں کر رہا. وہ عذاب بھی, اس کو میں عذاب کہتا ہوں. جس قسم کی زندگی ہم ان لٹیروں, لوٹ ڈاکوؤں کے ساتھ گزار رہے ہیں تو یہ عذاب ہے. تو کشمیریوں کو پھر بھی یہ عذاب قبول ہوگا, کیونکہ مسلمان ملکوں میں عذاب بھی جو ہے وہ ایک رحمت ہے. یہ سوچنا ہوگا, کیونکہ آپ مسلمانوں میں دیکھ لیجئے 57 ممالک ہیں, وہاں آزاد ملک کے طور پر آپ مسلمانوں کا حصہ ہوں گے, مسلمان برادری کا یا کمیونٹی کا حصہ ہوں گے, تو پھر بھی دنیا میں آپ کی عزت ہوگی, آپ کی پہچان ہوگی, آپ کی ڈگنیٹی ہوگی. اگر آپ ہندوستان میں رہیں گے تو وہ حال ہوگا جو آج مسلمانوں کا ہو رہا ہے وہاں, وہ ہوگا. یا پھر آپ چین کا حصہ ہوں گے تو آپ کو پھر اس کا مجھے کچھ بھی کہنے کی ضرورت نہیں ہے. تو یہ ساری باتیں کشمیری عوام کے ذہن میں اچھی طرح پتہ ہیں. یہ نوجوان نسل بھی ذرا پورے طریقے سے سمجھ جائے کہ پاکستان ہی کشمیریوں کا مستقبل ہے. بس
اس میں تھوڑا سا میں ایڈ کرنا, I want to add something to that.
جی سر.
وہ میں کہنا چاہتا ہوں کہ یہ it's an important question, but the questioner should understand. وہ بڑا اچھا جواب دے دیا. صرف میں ایک ان کے لفظ سے اتفاق نہیں کرتا, عذاب سے. اللہ تعالیٰ کا بڑا فضل ہے کہ Pakistan is still, I would say, in my view, today among the 57 countries, we are still the freest Muslim democracy, جو یہاں بھی ہے. اور اللہ تعالیٰ کا شکر ادا کریں اور قائد اعظم کو دعائیں دیں کہ قائد اعظم نے 80 سال پہلے دیکھ لیا تھا کہ یہ ہندوتوا سوچ کیا تھی جس کی بنیاد پر پاکستان بنایا گیا. کم سے کم آزاد ملک کے آزاد باشندے رہ رہے ہیں. ٹھیک ہے, مشکلات ہوں گی, گند ہوگا, کرپشن ہوگی, سارا کچھ ہوگا, لیکن پھر بھی آپ دیکھ لیں آزاد کشمیر میں جو کشمیری رہتے ہیں ان کا وہ حال نہیں ہے جو مقبوضہ کشمیر میں ہے. اور ہندوستان جا کے میں خود دیکھتا ہوں مسلمان تو سلام بھی نہیں کر سکتے, آداب کہنا پڑتا ہے, کپڑے چینج کر لیتے ہیں, داڑھی شیو کر لیتے ہیں. اب جو حال ہو رہا ہے, تو اللہ تعالیٰ کا فضل ہے کہ ایک ریاست ایسی ہے. اور کشمیر ایشو کو زندہ رکھا بھی تو میرے خیال میں پاکستان نے, پاکستان چاہے بھی مضبوط ہو کمزور ہو, ہم نے ہمیشہ کشمیر کے لیے آواز اٹھائی. ملک 2 لخت ہو چکا تھا ہندوستان جاری. شملہ میں ابھی بھی کشمیر کا ذکر ہے without prejudice to the respective on کشمیر. ہم نے کمپرومائز نہیں کیا کشمیر پر. آپ دیکھیں فلسطین کا کیا حال ہوا ہے, بری قیادت اور عربوں نے جو ان کے بٹرے کیا, معاملہ ختم کر دیا انہوں نے. پاکستان نے اس ایشو کو زندہ رکھا ہے اور اب بھی رکھ ہے, اور کشمیریوں کی آواز ہم اٹھاتے ہیں. we fight your case. کبھی بری اچھی طرح نہ کہے, کبھی نالائکی بھی ہوتی ہے, وہ ہو سکتا ہے, لیکن you should rest assured کہ پاکستان میں ایٹ لیسٹ ایک کھلی سانس کے ساتھ ایک آزاد زندگی تو رہ سکیں گے. اور یہ بڑا کلیئر کہا گیا کہ وہ جو آپشن ہے کہ جب وہ آپشن ایکسرسائز کریں گے حق خود ارادیت کا by joining with either Pakistan or India, once they have joined Pakistan, پھر the nature of the arrangement, کس قسم کی autonomy, کیا relationship, اس میں independence I don't think would be an option because that choice would not be there. But I think that most of the Kashmiris, میرے خیال میں جہاں بھی بات ہوتی ہے تو پاکستان کی کرکٹ ٹیم ہو, پاکستان کا جھنڈا ہو, تو وہ پاکستان کی بات کرتے ہیں. But that's all I wanted to say.
یہ جو میں کلیریفائی کر دوں, عذاب کا لفظ دراصل میں نے استعمال کیا ہے, تو اصل لفظ ہے میرے ذہن میں جو تھا وہ ایگنی ہے. اور میرے لیے ہر وہ لمحہ اپنے ہی ملک میں ایگنی کا ہے جب میں دیکھتا ہوں ملک کے وسائل کو لوٹا جا رہا ہو اور ان کو ضائع کیا جا رہا ہو. اور پھر یہ ہے جب میں دیکھتا ہوں کہ عدالتیں جو ہیں وہ کرمنلز کو فارگیونیس دیتے ہیں, معاف کرتے ہیں قانونی طریقے سے, کبھی این آر او کے ذریعے سے, کبھی ویسے چھوڑ کے. تو یہاں انصاف نہیں مل رہا. قائد اعظم کی ریاست میں انصاف تھا, قائد اعظم کی ریاست میں برابری تھی, ایکوالٹی تھی. قائد اعظم جس جمہوریت کا خواب دیکھتے تھے اس کا باقاعدہ ایک تصور تھا اور باقاعدہ فریم ورک تھا, ہر چیز یعنی معیشت کے حوالے سے, سوشل طریقے سے, ہر لحاظ سے. وہ ہمارے ملک میں ابھی تک نہیں ہوا, جس کی وجہ صرف حکمرانیت کی ناکامی ہے. اور ایسی حکمرانیت کی وجہ سے ہی ہم لوگ بددل ہوئے ہیں. اور میں یہ بھی بتا دوں, قائد اعظم کا چونکہ نام لے دیا گیا ہے, تو میں اور میری فیملی ان لاکھوں, اگر کروڑوں نہیں لاکھوں فیملیز کی جنریشن سے ہے تعلق میرا, جو ہندوستان میں اپنی ہزاروں سال پرانی آباء و اجداد کی جو شناخت تھی وہ چھوڑ کے آئے, اپنی جائیداد, زمینیں, مالیت سب کچھ چھوڑ کے آئے تھے. اور ہم صرف جناح کے پاکستان آئے تھے. اور آج مجھے 70 سال ہو گئے. مجھے اب تک یاد ہے وہ لمحات جب ہم یہاں ہربنسپورہ ریلوے اسٹیشن پر اترے تھے تو ہر ایک کی آنکھوں میں خوشی کے آنسو تھے. سب کچھ لوٹانے کے بعد کپڑے تک پورے نہیں تھے جسم پر, لیکن ہم لوگ آنسو خوشی کے تھے کہ ہم اب اپنی خوابوں کی جنت میں آ گئے ہیں. اور میں آج 70 سال بعد بھی اسی پاکستان کی تلاش میں ہوں جو قائد اعظم کا پاکستان تھا. مجھے وہ پاکستان نظر نہیں آ رہا, مجھے سوائے وہ ایتھنک اور لسانی یونٹس کے جس کو پنڈت نہرو نے 1946 میں کہا تھا کہ بالآخر یہ جو ریاست آزاد کرنے جا رہے ہیں یہ کلچرلی اٹانومس اینٹیز کے علاوہ کچھ نہیں رہے گا. بدقسمتی یہ ہے کہ میرے ملک کے سیاستدانوں نے, کرپٹ سیاستدانوں نے آج ملک کو 4 ان راجدھانیوں میں ڈیوائڈ کر دیا ہوا ہے جو پنڈت نہرو کے تصور کے مطابق کلچرلی اٹانومس اینٹیز کے علاوہ کچھ نہیں رہی. نہ ان میں کوئی عزت ہے, نہ وقار ہے, نہ کوئی ڈگنیٹی ہے, نہ وہاں کے وسائل ٹھیک طریقے سے استعمال ہوتے ہیں. لوٹ ہے اور لوٹ مار کا بازار گرم ہے. تو کشمیری ابھی سب کچھ دیکھ رہے ہیں اور میں نے ان کو برابر مشورہ دے رہا ہوں کہ گیٹ اٹ آف دس ڈیوائسو پاکستانی پالیٹکس. یہ جو پالیٹکس ہے اس نے بھی اس ملک کو تباہ کر دیا ہے اور کشمیریوں کا بھی وقت ہے کہ وہ اس سے بچ جائیں. بس سیدھی سی بات میں یہ کہتا ہوں. اور آپ درست کہتے ہیں جمہوریت ہے, یہ برائے نام کی جمہوریت ہے. مشاہد صاحب آپ کو بھی پتہ ہے, آپ نے بھی پڑھا ہوا ہے, میں نے جمہوریت میں اسٹوڈنٹ رہا ہوں پالیٹکس کا, مجھے پتہ ہے جمہوریت کیا ہوتی ہے. تو خیر آج کل تو جمہوریت ایون ان برٹن آپ نہیں کہہ سکتے جمہوریت ہے, امریکہ میں نہیں ہے, وہاں آپ نے نقشہ دیکھ لیا جمہوریت کا جو ہو رہا ہے. تو بات وہی ہے کہ ہمیں اپنے لیے ایک پیکولر قسم کی جمہوری چاہیے, سسٹم چاہیے جو ہمارے عوام کی جینیس کے مطابق ہو. اور اس کے لیے پڑھے لکھے پارلیمنٹیرین چاہیے, آپ جیسے, ہمیں سارے پارلیمنٹیرین آپ جیسے چاہیے جو دنیا کے ساتھ بات کر سکیں. آپ نے کہا کہ پارلیمنٹری ڈپلومیسی, مجھے بتا دیجئے کتنے پارلیمنٹیرینز ہیں جو جا کے باہر کسی کے ساتھ انٹریکٹ کر سکتے ہیں. اسی وجہ سے میں اب اوپنلی یہ تجویز دیا کرتا ہوں کہ جس طرح میرے لیے ایک امتحان تھا, جس طرح میں نے ٹریننگ کی, اس کے بعد میں نے ریاستی ذمہ داریاں قبول کی, تو یہ سیاستدانوں کے لیے کیوں نہیں ہے کہ ایک باقاعدہ پڑھائی کا معیار مقرر کیا جائے, اس کے بعد ان کی ٹریننگ ہونی چاہیے, میرٹ کے اوپر ان کو الیکشن کا رزلٹ لڑنے کی اجازت ہونی چاہیے تاکہ پھر وہ ملک کی قانون سازی میں بہتر کردار ادا کر سکے, کمیٹیاں جو ہیں ان کو ٹھیک طریقے سے چلا سکے. اس قسم کے ویڈیوز ہمارے سامنے نہ آئیں جب وہ پیسے 5-5 کروڑ لے کر اپنا ووٹ بیچ رہے ہوں. تو یہ جمہوریت کا ہم نے ایک بتنگڑ نہیں, ایک تماشا بنا دیا ہے. یہ جو کچھ نظر آ رہا ہے یہ سرکس ہو رہا ہے, یہ جو سڑکوں پر دیکھ رہے ہیں آج کل گنگا بشتی ہو رہی ہے, یہ سرکس ہے جمہوریت کے نام پر ہو رہا ہے. خدا بچائے اس قسم کی جمہوریت سے. تسی آ جاؤ واپس مشاہد صاحب.
Next question. ویسے تو India claims to be the largest democracy and America the oldest democracy, and we know what happened. وہ کہتے ہیں نا لائف میں sometimes what is desirable is not available and what is available is not desirable. but you have to live in the real world and you try to change the world. Next question.
Yeah. Sir, Mr. Mohammad Sharif, Government College University, Lahore سے پوچھ رہے ہیں. He's asking President Musharraf's 4-point formula, despite having a global appeal, could not ease the tension between India and Pakistan on the disputed issue of Kashmir. Where lies the responsibility of its failure, with India or Pakistan? And what do you think are the major stumbling blocks in normalization of ties between two different states?
شمشاد صاحب.
جی میں بتاتا ہوں پھر آپ ایڈ کر دیجئے. دیکھیے مشرف کا فارمولا جو اس وقت ڈائنامکس بدلتے رہتے ہیں. مثلا میں نے 98 میں میں نے انڈیا کے ساتھ ایک پیس پروسیس شروع کیا تھا. وہ میں اسی وقت کر سکتا تھا. اگر میں آج وہی چیز کرنا چاہوں نہیں کر سکوں گا. تو ہر چیز کا ایک وقت مقرر ہوتا ہے. مشرف کا وہ وقت تھا, اس وقت ہندوستان میں ایک ایسی سوچ تھی کہ وہ پاکستان کے ساتھ پرامن حل چاہتے تھے. بالکل اسی طرح جس طرح واجپئی جب 90s میں یہاں لاہور آئے تھے تو وہ ایک حل چاہتے تھے کشمیر کا, اور ہم پروسیس شروع کر رہے تھے. اور اس وقت مشرف نے اس پروسیس کو ڈیریل کیا تھا کارگل لا کر. تو بہرحال وہ اس وقت پرانے حصوں کو میں نہیں لانا چاہتا. آپ نے چونکہ مشرف کے فارمولے کی بات کی ہے, تو بات یہ ہے کہ جب مشرف نے وہ 4 نکاتی پروسیس نیگوشیٹ انڈیا کے ساتھ کیا تھا, اس سے پہلے کہ وہ فائنل ڈیسیجن ہوتا, مشرف کا یہاں پر ہی تیا پاسا ہو گیا تھا. کیا کہتے ہیں اس کو, تیا پانچا. اس نے وہ عدلیہ پر وار کر کے تو پاکستان میں ایک موومنٹ چل پڑی, جس کی وجہ سے وہ سارا پروسیس ڈسرپٹ ہو گیا تھا. انڈیا کو بھی یہ نہیں سمجھ آ رہا تھا کہ یہ شخص جو اب جانے والا ہے تو میں اس کے ساتھ کیا نیگوشیٹ کروں. تو وہ وہیں ختم ہو گیا. لیکن میں ذاتی طور پر اس وقت اس 4 نکاتی فارمولے کے خلاف تھا, اور آج کی اور بات ہے. لیکن میں نے اس وقت اپوز کیا تھا پبلکلی, قطع نظر اس کے کہ ہم قصوری صاحب میرے بڑے اچھے دوست ہیں. لیکن میں کہنا یہ چاہتا ہوں کہ کسی بھی مسئلے کا جو سٹیٹس کو ہوتا ہے وہ مسئلہ ہوتا ہے, وہ حل نہیں ہو سکتا. یعنی سٹیٹس کو, مشرف کا جو فارمولا تھا وہ لیجیٹمائزیشن آف دا سٹیٹس کو تھا, کہ اسی طرح لائن آف کنٹرول رہنی تھی, اسی طرح مقبوضہ کشمیر رہنا تھا. ہمارا صرف یہ تھا کہ دونوں سائڈ میں آنا جانا ایک ہیومن, آپ کہہ لیجئے کہ ہیومن رائٹس کا ایشو کے طور پر وہ تھا کہ ایک جوائنٹ میکنزم بن جانا تھا. وہ دونوں طرف کے کشمیریوں کو ایک کونسل بن جاتی, کوئی ان کے پاس ایک تو کیا ہو طاقت نہ ہوتی, پاور نہ ہوتی, لیکن وہ ایک بس جس کو کہتے ہیں سمپٹمز کو ٹائلنول دے کے یا پیناڈول کی گولی دے کے درد ختم کرنے والی بات تھی. اصل مسئلے کا حل نہیں تھا. آج مجھے وہ حل بہترین حل نظر آئے گا آج کے حالات میں, کیونکہ سچویشن آن دا گراؤنڈ مودی نے بالکل بدل دی ہے. اب کشمیری بھی تنگ آ گئے ہیں اس سچویشن سے, اور ہمارے لیے بھی اب بہت مشکل ہوتا جا رہا ہے سسٹین کرنا. تو آج وہ حل ہم چاہیں تو ہم اس طرف نہیں جا سکتے. انڈیا نہیں مانے گا تو اس وقت تو کسی قسم کا حل سوچنا بھی یہ بے وقوفی ہوگی. ہم نہیں اس وقت حل کی کوشش کر سکتے. اس وقت جو عمران خان کی جو پرائرٹی ہے وہ صرف ایک ہے, اور وہ ہے کہ مقبوضہ اور ظلم ہو رہا ہے وہ ختم کیا جائے, اور 5 اگست کا جو اسٹیٹس کو اینٹی تھا اس طرف جایا جائے. تو یہ ایک اور قسم کا سٹیٹس کو ہے جس کے لیے عمران خان اب کوشش کر رہا ہے, وہ یہی ہے. اور اس سے کشمیر کا مسئلہ حل نہیں ہوگا, وہ کشمیریوں کی سختیاں ختم کرنے کی طرف ہے. ان پہ جو ظلم ہو رہے ہیں وہ ختم کرنا ہے, تاکہ ایک فاشسٹ اور وہ ان کو اس ظلم ستم سے نجات دلائے. شکریہ.
I think ٹھیک ہے, it's a very clear exposition of the whole thing جی. اور میں اگری کرتا ہوں کہ وہ اسٹیٹس کو کینٹ بی دا سولوشن. ساری جنگ یہ ہے کہ جو اسٹیٹس کو ہندوستان نے امپوز کرنے کی کوشش کی ہے, دیٹ از ناٹ ایکسیپٹیبل ٹو دا پیپل آف کشمیر. تو ہاؤ کین پیپل فرام آؤٹ سائڈ سے کہ ٹھیک ہے وی ڈرا دا لائنس اینڈ دین وی ایکسیپٹ دیٹ, اینڈ سو دیٹ ول ناٹ بی ایکسیپٹیبل. اینڈ ایز Shamshad Sahab rightly said, there's a window of opportunity. That window was at that point in time. I still remember 2007 کوئی اپریل میں میسج آیا منموہن سنگھ صاحب کا کہ جی وہ تیار ہیں اس چیز کے لیے, but by that time وہ events had overtaken the whole thing because the judiciary movement was at its peak. So the domestic situation could not have allowed General Musharraf to take that decision. So that is history. And later on, it was disowned immediately by the government which came after that. Yeah. And even by the military high command also, it was General Kiani, and also they also sort of did not own it up after General Musharraf. The next question.
Thank you very much. It looks like we have covered the main items for today's meeting. I would like to thank our worthy speakers for sparing time in their busy schedules and joining us here at IPI. I would hand over the session to Senator Musharraf and Sayyid for his concluding remarks about the way forward for Pakistan's Kashmir strategy.
ठीक है जी, thank you so much. I think ये बड़ी देर के बाद, thanks to the Islamabad Policy Institute and thanks to Professor Bukhari Saab and his team, talented team I would say, and also the worthy panelists, such outstanding people like Rana Shamshad Saab, who have been a beacon of light in the foreign service, and also General Asif Yasin Malik Saab, who from the military side, a thinking general, as I said, इन्होंने बड़ा अच्छा contribute किया. और also I would like to thank the participants जिन्होंने informed or frank questions पूछे. I think when we talk of the way forward, we should also just briefly, क्योंकि theme में ये भी था assessment. I think assessment में we should be also be very clear that when we talk of the future, जो माजी की छोटी मोटी गलतियां भी हो वो नहीं होनी चाहिए. एक तो ये मैं कहना चाहता हूँ कि दो तीन चीजें जो मोदी के गवर्नमेंट में लास्ट 2-3 years में हुई. एक पुलवामा के बाद, पुलवामा क्राइसिस के बाद, and I would say that Pakistan's handling of the Pulwama crisis after the Indian attack on Balakot on 26th of February 2019, which was the first time after 71 that India had actually done an act of war, an act of aggression against Pakistani territory. Our handling of the Pulwama crisis after the Indian attack on Balakot was Pakistan's finest hour after our handling of the nuclear tests. उस वक्त भी बड़े sophisticated तरीके से, mature तरीके से, calm and cool तरीके से handling हुई, and we scored. India thought Pakistan को bully और browbeat कर सकेगा. They failed, and when we tested 6 times against their 5 tests, India blinked. वो इतनी बातें कर रहा था Advani 1998 में, वो नहीं हुआ. इस दफा भी India ने इतना शोर मचाया, and when we hit back within 24 hours to the Indian aggression and Balakot, we shot down 2 of their planes. We captured one of their pilots, Abhinandan, and we returned him as a gesture of goodwill, as we had done in Kargil also, by the way. So that showed Pakistan had captured that moral high ground. लेकिन उसके बाद I thought that ये जो हमारी assessment मोदी के बारे में ठीक नहीं रही. People thought that his aggressive stance was tactical. It's linked only with the elections for an election victory. No. Modi he's no Vajpayee. He represents a different kind of mindset, the Hindutva mindset, which is very divisive, which is बड़ी एक तासुब, तजाद, तकसीम की सोच है, which is anti-Muslim at home and anti-Pakistan abroad. So I think that we should get our assessment right, that we are dealing with an enemy which has a certain clear perspective of Pakistan. India has a clear Pakistan policy and a clear policy on Kashmir. We don't have a clear India policy or a clear policy on Kashmir. It's mostly ad hoc reactive approach. For example, after 5th August 2019, what has happened in occupied Kashmir? 2 million domiciles have been issued. 2 million domiciles to outsiders, mostly non-Muslim, all non-Muslim, to settle in occupied Kashmir because they want to do the demographic change in occupied Kashmir. I think that is a very, very big, serious challenge that we have. We have a new administration in Washington. We were banking on Trump for mediation. Mediation की हम बात ही ना करें. अगर अमेरिका mediate करेगा, वो हमारे हक में नहीं होगा. That will be to the advantage of India. So I think we should be very clear on that aspect. Yes, we have done diplomacy in the UN. और एक और चीज मैं बात करता हूँ. जनरल आसिफ यासीन मलिक साहब ने बड़ी strong बातें की UN के बारे में. I don't fully agree with that, frankly. क्योंकि वो UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres visited Pakistan in February 2020, 4 days visit. And I had the opportunity of having 2 interactions with him, including a dinner with him as Chairman Senate Foreign Affairs Committee. Foreign Minister साहब ने फिर एक और meeting भी कराई हमारी पूरी committee की. The Foreign Minister was there, I was there, and my committee was there. And we had a 2-hour interaction separately, and then dinner separately. I have never found, I've met many UN Secretary General, never found a UN Secretary General so favorably disposed towards Pakistan and Pakistan's position on Kashmir. And he was very clear, UN resolutions are still relevant. And the UN, and he said the Kashmiri rights must be respected. And he also said that Pakistan has not been treated well by we have always been attacked. So I think there are conditions which are favorable today. In my view, Pakistan has got some strategic space for the next couple of years. क्या वो strategic space की बात कर रहा हूँ? Modi for the first time is on the defensive because of his wrong policies, because of India's economy, because of COVID-19, the Sikh farmers protests, the Kashmiri resistance. There is a lot of resistance within India. Arundhati Roy wrote in New York Times that, what did she say? Silence is the loudest sound in an op-ed on after the annexation of Kashmir. RSS is the state in India today. There's an architecture of fascism being erected today. ये Arundhati Roy कह रही है, top Indian writer, not I, not any Pakistani. So we should be very clear. We should have an outreach to India, to Indian society, minus Modi. And I think there'll be a lot of takers for a good relationship with Pakistan. And it's very clear. And ये जो destabilization हो रही है और हमारा जो dossier दिया गया है state terrorism पर जो foreign office ने दिया, मुझे भी present किया था foreign minister साहब ने, उसमें क्या है? There are 87 raw operated training camps against Pakistan, 66 in Afghanistan, 21 in India. These are the figures, these are the facts. So India is has already launched an undeclared hybrid war against Pakistan through Afghanistan, directly also. Secondly, CPEC and our China relationship has given us space. We are emerging as the hub of regional connectivity between Pakistan and Central Asian republics, with China, and that is also a very key element. Thirdly, we also feel that the United States of America, they need us for Afghanistan. We will not have that kind of pressure from the US that we had in the past. The doom or mantra will be limited because they need Pakistan for some sort of an honorable, graceful exit from Afghanistan. And we have already delivered on their talks with the Afghan Taliban, and we have already delivered on the intra-Afghan dialogue. And don't forget that America now is a power which is on the decline, especially after what we have seen within the United States. The US is polarized more than even Pakistan today. So I think they'll be having a less intrusive, less interventionist foreign policy. And you will see maybe some improvement of US relations with Iran, which will be very positive for us because Iran is a neighbor, which means lessening of tensions in the region. So given all these, Modi being on the defensive, under pressure, India's relations with Nepal, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, China, not so good. And China also a factor in the Kashmir dispute for the first time now. So I think that overall, Pakistan has got strategic space, a geopolitical breather. We should use this to our advantage. जैसे शमशाद साहब ने भी फरमाया था, जरल साहब ने भी कहा था, parliamentary diplomacy is one thing, Kashmiri diaspora is another one, public opinion in the West is there. इस वक्त हमारा ये है कि दो चीजें होनी चाहिए. जो कश्मीरी अवाम के खिलाफ मजालिम ढाए जा रहे हैं, alleviation of their sufferings at the hands of the brutal Indian occupation army, 9 lakh strong, वो human rights के हवाले से. और दूसरा एक हिम्मत हौसला दिलाएं, Pakistan continues to stand with the Kashmiri people. Keeping the Kashmir cause of freedom alive. And we can do that. Pakistan is an important state and in a very important part of the world. Our voice does carry. But this issue is above one person, one party, one government, one institution. It has to have a national approach, above party politics. And इसमें मैं government से भी appeal करता हूँ, they should have an outreach to the opposition also. Because on Kashmir, the meeting हुई थी, everybody got together. Kashmir Shipper, everybody got together. CPEC, they got together. So we should do that and take it forward. Pakistan में मुल्क में बड़ी जान है. हमने बड़ा काम किया हुआ है. Pakistan has played a role even supporting the oppressed in Bosnia or the oppressed in South Africa, the oppressed in Zimbabwe, the oppressed in Palestine, not just Afghanistan. तो हमारे मुल्क में बड़ी हिम्मत वाले लोग हैं और broader vision वाले लोग हैं, and we can take it forward. And I think that one important aspect of the seminar today, organized by the Islamabad Policy Research Institute, and I thank Professor Buhari Saab and his team for this, is that इन्होंने clarify की है कई चीजें, और शमशाद साहब ने जवाब दिए, particularly constitutional articles के Kashmir issue पर, and General साहब ने भी. So I think that we are all the more wiser after this event, which I think is a big thing. And I wish all of you good luck. Stay safe from the COVID-19. वो जैक मा ने कहा था ना, जो अली बाबा का ओनर है, कि 2020 was a year of staying alive. So if you have come through from that crisis, inshallah, नए हिम्मत के साथ, नए बलबले के साथ, we should take the Kashmir cause forward. कश्मीरी तो तैयार हैं आज़ादी के लिए, तो हमें भी पूरा give them a final push on that and take it forward and put Modi on the defensive. और एक और area where we have not taken that option, future की बात करते हैं ना, पार्लियामेंट्री डिप्लोमेसी की बात होगी, वर्ल्ड पब्लिक ओपिनियन की बात होगी, आउटरीच टू इवन इंडिया होगी, अदर डिप्लोमेसी जो कन्वेंशनल करते हैं, इज अ फील्ड कॉल्ड लॉफेयर. Lawfare is that using legal means to promote this case. While when Modi was in Houston, आपको याद है, the Kashmir Khalistan Referendum Front took Modi to court in Houston. वो केस में admit हो गया था. The European Court of Human Rights जो है, it has got universal jurisdiction. Courts in the UK, courts in Europe, courts in the US have universal jurisdiction. And we should expose the RSS. We should expose these people. Take them to the court कि ये as a fascist and a racist organization, उनका चेहरा बेनकाब तो करे ना. Put them on the defensive. So there are different means available, and I think we should all collectively do that. It's not just the government, it has to be done as a national organized approach, which we can sustain with stamina. In 1974, Mr. Bhutto had decided that we'll go nuclear. 24 years lage. Governments change, hui, ko Fauji aaye, ko civilian aaye, but we had the stamina, the strength, the vision, and the will to take it through. 1998, when Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was there and Rana Saab was the Foreign Secretary, and I was the Information Minister, 28th May, we became a nuclear power. And that is one thing which is so vital for our national security and national defense. India dare not attack Pakistan because of the fear of this nuclear factor. So the dunya has changed, and I think Pakistan should now work collectively together to take the Kashmir cause forward. Loya Garme, the situation is conducive to promoting the Kashmir case in all international capitals, and especially also I agree with the suggestion made about the Azad Kashmir elections. Focus on the local issues rather than political point scoring, because that will be detrimental to the Kashmir cause. Thank you very much. And thank you to the Islamabad Policy Institute, and thank you Rana Saab, and thank you General Saab, and all the rest of it. All the rest. Khuda Hafiz.